Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Chloe Carmichael. Thank you so much for joining me for this live stream. I'm really excited to share with you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. Just while I'm waiting for all of this to load, I just want to start off by sharing with you that we're going to be talking about a lot of different things today. And I want everyone to try to remember that this is about options, not obligations. So the last thing I want anyone to feel is, a level of stress or overwhelm by, feeling like they have to do all of the ideas and suggestions that I'm going to be offering today. Because I think we can sometimes feel this pressure, especially as high functioning people, that we're supposed to be doing all of this, big productive stuff during quarantine. And that's normal for high functioning people to feel that way. But as a psychologist, what I want people to know is that even if you find yourself sometimes just kind of watching the proverbial paint dry and you're thinking, why am I not doing more? I'm just sitting here at home. I want you to know that in the back of your mind, you're actually processing a lot more than you probably realize. Obviously, quarantine has stirred up a lot of thoughts for us about health and survival and control and just all of these things. And so if you find yourself sometimes just wanting to sit on the couch and chill a little bit, try to be gentle with yourself around that. I've had so many clients tell me that they feel, like they must be lazy or whatever, just because they're kind of feeling a little bit stuck on their couch sometimes. And while it is good sometimes to nudge yourself to take the first step in action, I, again, just want to remind you that sometimes just sitting in stillness, just sitting quietly, is actually doing more than you think in terms of giving your mind some space to process all of this stuff. So I just, want to thank everyone again for coming, recognizing that in this large public live stream, we've got all kinds of different people coming. So we've got families, we've got singles, we've got parents, we've got, professionals, couples, everybody. So we're going to have some tips for everybody. And you will see there at the bottom that we've got some resources. So there's drchloe.com/COVID, where there's some links to some products and articles and things that I like. And of course, there's also drchloe.com/book, because I do have an upcoming book on, the subject of nervous energy and my work with high functioning people. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find out more. I just want to say, of course, also that today's presentation is not therapy. It's just a public information that I'm sharing about some things that I have found have been helpful to people I've been working with. But obviously, if you need, individual one-to-one therapy, I encourage you to get it. And on drchloe.com/COVID, there are some links, even to some articles I've written about choosing a good therapist and all of that kind of stuff. But today is really just more about self-help, about some tips that we can think about for ourselves, that we can do just right from home. Whenever we're looking at stressors in life, it's really important to know that what the stressors we encounter in life are actually much less important than how we navigate those stressors. This is why, for example, you'll have people that are living in extreme poverty or with terminal illnesses, yet they're able to be balanced and happy and find joy. Whereas you'll sometimes then have other people that have a wealth of resources and all kinds of support, and yet they struggle to find happiness, right? And so there's a lot of factors that could play into that. But one of the big ones is how we manage our stress. And when it comes to managing stress, one of the most important things that's true, whether you are, in the grandpa space or the parent space or the single space, anywhere in between, the managing to focus on the things that you can control is generally one of the healthiest ways that we can navigate stressors, almost no matter what they are. And the things that are within our zone of control when it comes to quarantine here that I want to highlight are the way that we structure our environment, the way that we manage our daily routines, the way that we practice self-care, and the boundaries that we have with other people, because boundaries are getting a little bit blurred, certainly during this time. Now, one of the things that, when people were writing in with their questions and things that they were hoping I would talk about during this presentation, this workshop, is structure and routine. How do we find structure and routine? And I'm always interested in ways that we can actually have technology support us. And these are going to be helpful tips, I hope, for you during quarantine, but also potentially even after. So, please take comfort in knowing that whatever efforts you decide to make, whatever things you decide to try from this workshop, it's not just wasted effort that's just going to go away after quarantine. You're doing things for yourself that are going to help you even after quarantine is over. So with that said, when it comes to structure and routine, I would encourage you to think about ways that your environment can support you automatically. So, for example, if you have your smart home device, like mine is Alexa, I don't want to even say the name right now because she'll wake up. But you can program your smart home device to, for example, put on light classical music for you at 8 a.m. every morning. And then maybe have her programmed to put on some nature sounds for you, say at 8 p.m. every evening. And that takes away some of the admin burden for you of having to create an environment for yourself. And the nice thing about getting your environment to shift automatically for you, especially in quarantine, is because we're not as in touch with some of the rhythms of our everyday lives, right? So usually we wake up in the morning, have a shower, go to the office, whatever, and our environment is changing around us just because we're mobile and we're moving. So when we're grounded in one place, we need to think about how we can get that environment to change for us, right? Another thing when it comes to structure and routine is the value of a shower. I've actually been really surprised at some of the number of high functioning people I've been working with that have said, like, yeah, I'm not really showering as much because I'm, in quarantine, I'm not around people. And then they're wondering why they're, starting to feel kind of low energy and down in the, kind of a depressive space. And there's something called behavioral activation in psychology, which is around the idea that if we start to take on the behaviors of a person, for example, who's depressed, we could actually start to become a little bit depressed. And one of the markers of a person with significant depression is actually that they let their hygiene go. So I encourage you to make sure that you start your day off with a shower. It's a really great way to get yourself moving, taking good care of yourself, certainly also in the evenings or just other ways to kind of mark an anchor point in your day that the day has started or to mark the end of the day. Showers are great. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also, you'll notice I've got some books with some headphones on them. That's because I really encourage people to, think about listening to audiobooks and things like that as they're starting to go to sleep. Some people have said that they're having trouble sleeping. And when you listen to an audiobook as you go to sleep, that's a really nice thing to do because it gives your internal monologue something to wrap its mind around the same way that watching TV or reading a book would do, which people kind of like. High functioning people tend to like at the end of the day because their mind is going a million miles an hour. However, you get to do it with your eyes closed. So that's a really important thing, is that it allows you to have your internal monologue just focused on something relaxing in a story, but to be able to do it with your eyes closed. Also, when we think about structure and routine, we want to remember that, of course, our bodies are within our control. And when we are in quarantine, there is a sense of confinement. It's not just a sense of confinement. We're actually less able to be mobile and to get out there and use our bodies. And using our bodies is one of the ways that we burn off cortisol, our stress hormone. So here we are in quarantine, which can raise our stress. And then we are not finding ways necessarily to burn off that stress because we're having a less mobile lifestyle. So it's a really important time to make sure that you're getting your exercise. Maybe consider splurging a little bit on, a virtual personal trainer, even if it's not something you would usually do for yourself, to recognize that this is actually a really special, unique situation where you kind of want to pull out all the stops in terms of your self-care. Also, when it comes to your daily routine, to think about quiet reflection. And again, these are things that many of us might have always meant to do anyway, always wanted to have a journaling practice or a meditation practice. So these are good habits for us anyway, but they're especially important during times of stress. Many studies have shown that religiosity is a protective factor during times of stress. It doesn't even matter what religion. If a person is Jewish or, Muslim or Christian, any religion, tends to help people to process stress better. So on drclay.com/COVID, I do have some links to all kinds of online spiritual things, including meditation and journaling. All of these things are good ways to find time for quiet reflection. And if you might even just challenge yourself to spend 5 minutes every morning or every evening in quiet reflection, you might be pleasantly surprised at the effects that that can have on you over time. It's also, as I'm sure everybody knows, really important to connect with nature, but it's especially important during quarantine when we're like literally inside almost all the time. So here you'll see, for example, even if it's something as simple as getting a plant, having it by your window. For my son on Amazon.com, I recently ordered like a caterpillars to butterflies kit, and I got it for him. But I'll tell you, it's been pretty neat for me too, just to be able to see and watch these little caterpillars becoming butterflies. And so, it's like $20 on Amazon. I think a really good purchase if you go there and just punch in like caterpillars to butterfly kits. Also, you see there, I've got that Amazon Alexa device. I don't want to say her name too loud because she'll wake up. And then also that picture of the chair is actually showing a sunlight lamp, right? So for those of us that might tend to get seasonal affective issues, especially being in quarantine might start to mimic some of that stuff. So we want to make sure that we're getting our nature fix. Certainly in your work from home environment, I encourage you to give yourself every possible way to make that experience easier. So whether that means that you want to get yourself a landline telephone, since like a lot of people have said that cell phone signals are getting a little bit overused right now. A signal repeater, like if you're someone that has some kind of any Wi-Fi issues in your house, you want to just get rid of all those types of things. Also noise canceling headphones, the binaural means over 2 ears, especially for those of you that are trying to share space with other people and multiple people are trying to have conference calls at the same time. I would just encourage you to really be generous with yourself and to recognize that whatever purchases or things that you might want to get for yourself right now, especially if it's about work or your self-care, these are not luxurious indulgences. This is really you trying to set yourself up for success. Now, there is something also, we're going to talk about some stuff later that's more relevant really for families and couples, but especially for those of you who are living alone. I want to introduce a concept called skin hunger. And as the name implies, it's really about the desire and the need to be touched and held. Human beings are tribal animals, and we really need that sense of skin contact. And so even those of us that do live with other people, we're still getting less touch and less physical contact than before. So again, on drclay.com/COVID, I do have some links to some of my favorite stuff, but you can certainly Google for your own stuff. So what we have here is an electric blanket warmer on the left. And if you have your blankets and things warmed in the evening or a warm towel after you get out of the shower, it's not the same, obviously, but it's getting closer to that feeling of a warm body nearby you. And this woman here has something called a huggaroo, which is like a weighted vest that goes around you. And there's a weighted blanket as well. A lot of times autistic people actually, these products were kind of made a little bit around that industry of serving the needs of autistic people, because some autistic people don't always feel comfortable with physical contact with others, even though it is, there's something soothing and important about it. So things like weighted blankets or these huggaroos originally were being marketed to people with autism. But now, especially during the time of quarantine, many, people, I personally own every single product on the screen here, and I don't have autism. Many people are finding these types of things just really helpful to augment their wellness. Same here for these electric massage booties and things like that. It kind of on some level mimics that feeling of being squeezed or held. I know it's not the same, obviously, And it is just a temporary workaround. It is important to remember that quarantine is time limited, of course, which whenever we're dealing with any stressor, to remember that it's time limited is always important. But at the same time, again, these are products that are typically going to be useful for people even after quarantine. I owned all of these products even before quarantine. I think that they just help to, create warmth and space and coziness in your life. Also, on the subject of skin hunger, and there's special yoga for people to, that are maybe experiencing that skin hunger. I was a yoga teacher before I was a psychologist. And so what we have here are, say, if you look at this woman there on the right, who's doing a forward bend, she's actually experiencing human touch. So she's experiencing the feeling of breath upon her shoulder. She's experiencing what it feels like to breathe close to someone's skin. She's experiencing what it feels like to rest your head in someone's lap, and she's experiencing the weight of a head upon your lap. The man with the strap, he's experiencing what it feels like to feel pulled towards someone. And the woman there in repose is just feeling what it feels like to feel supported as you kind of lay back and relax and have that support, almost like somebody, cuddling up around you. And again, I know it's not the same, but our bodies on a certain level would rather have something than nothing. And so if you're finding that you're struggling with skin hunger, these are some workarounds. One more slide here on skin hunger is just to know that it's important to feel like you can talk about it. The worst thing we ever want to do is actually disconnect from a need. So sometimes if we have a need and we feel powerless to meet it, we can start to just disconnect from it and pretend like, well, I didn't care about that anyway. And that can feel tempting in the moment to act like we don't need it. But what that really does then is it causes us to disconnect from ourselves, and it leads to feelings like numbness or just a lack of engagement because we're not in touch with our needs and in touch with ourselves. So if you're feeling like you're having skin hunger or just loneliness or whatever, I really encourage you to talk about it, to, call someone, talk about it. You can blame it on me. You can blame it on this workshop that you saw this workshop and learned about skin hunger. And we're told that you should talk about it if you think it's something that you might be struggling with, by all means. Even if you want to engage with me on social media, talk about anything that you're seeing in this, workshop. I'd love to engage with people. Obviously, my ability to engage on social media back is somewhat limited, but I do like to be able to engage as much as I can. Speaking of engagement, face-to-face contact is super important. And I know some people are having Zoom fatigue, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But nevertheless, we have these things called mirror neurons in our brain, and mirror neurons only fire when they see another human face. And as the name mirror neurons implies, the mirror neurons will mirror whatever facial expression they are seeing. And so that is the brain underpinnings of empathy. When we can see someone, we literally see what they're feeling, and then our mirror neurons actually literally take that on. So we're starting to automatically get a sense of connection with the other person, where we don't get that if we don't have face-to-face contact. So please, if you can, try to connect with people on video. Again, I know some people have said, look, I've had enough video, and that's okay. And you can certainly listen to yourself if that's the case. But another kind of workaround, if you are having Zoom fatigue, is to try sitting a little bit back, right? Because some studies have shown that when our faces are this close to the camera, it can be a little unnerving because maybe your brain feels like someone's in your face. And so you can sit a little bit further back if you want to have a little bit more of a sense of space. I just personally, because this is a workshop and I'm trying to be in your face a little bit, I've got my face right up here to the camera, but it's just one thing to think about. Also, if you are spending a lot of time on Zoom, I encourage you to think about the lighting that you have. So as you can see, I've got some professional lighting here. Really wasn't that expensive at all, like less than $100. And again, if you want to see any of the stuff that I personally got, you can go to that link at the bottom of the presentation, drclay.com/COVID. If you're going to be spending time in front of your computer on Zoom, again, I encourage you to have some kind of a light so that when you're looking at your face on Zoom all day, you're looking at a bright, lively version of your face. There's nothing more kind of depressing and fatiguing and low energy inducing than looking at like a dim, dark version, of your face all day. So I encourage you to literally and figuratively put yourself in the best possible light. Now, another thing when we think about control, the zone of control, wanting to focus on the things that we can control, is choosing to help others, but also knowing when and how to set boundaries. It can feel really good to help others. And again, on that website /COVID below, I do have some online volunteer opportunities, some links, suicide hotlines, they need volunteers. There's, online tutoring for kids that are, needing some extra help. If you have the time and the bandwidth, volunteering is a great way to get out of your own head a little bit, kind of make your universe a little bit bigger, right? Even from the quarantine of your home. Or you might be on the other side where you need to learn how to say no to people and set some boundaries. And that's okay too. Learning how to, sometimes there's an assumption that because we're in quarantine and we're home all the time, that we must always be available. And this is especially true, I've found, for people that are living alone, that there's an assumption by their friends and family or by their employers, that they're just constantly available. So if you feel like you're in that situation, I want you to know that it is totally okay for you to just take some time for yourself. If people are asking, can you do this? Can you do that? And you feel like, some people have told me who live alone, they say, well, I feel like, people with families, like their employer, other people kind of understand, like, oh, they can't do such and such because they have family needs, and I'm alone, I live alone, and so everything falls on me. I encourage you to know that you can still tell people that you have a family situation that you need to take care of, because you are in your family. So even if it's just you needing to have a quiet night with yourself, and it's not something you feel would be easily understood by the person you're talking to, you can always say, like, actually, I have some family obligations that evening, if that's just easier for people to understand for some reason. And just knowing, again, that you are part of your family. Now, another thing when it comes to boundaries for people who don't live alone, is couples. So couples in this particular time, I think, are more vulnerable to something called enmeshment. Now, enmeshment in psychology is when you start thinking of your partner and you as almost like the same person. And ironically, enmeshment happens in strong, healthy couples that are very close. And it sounds positive, but it's actually, enmeshment is considered a little bit too much, right? Of not really recognizing the boundaries of where you end and they begin. And so that's why, for example, if you're in an enmeshment situation in a couple, you might find yourself feeling the need to correct every little word that the person mispronounces, or, feel like, every little thing kind of becomes a big deal. Or if you're a perfectionist in your heart and yourself, you suddenly find yourself really nitpicking your partner in a way that you would never do to a friend. And again, ironically, this is happening because of a close relationship gone haywire to the point of being enmeshed. And I do think that in the quarantine situation, it's understandable, that we could be vulnerable to enmeshment. So if you feel like that might be happening to you, I would really encourage you to consider, just trying to mentally take a step back with love from your partner, and recognize that they really are a separate person, that they can do things their own way, and maybe even mentally just pretending to yourself that you're on a first date with that person again, or like that person is just a friend, so to speak, because that can help you to kind of reset yourself and start to recognize that, they're your partner and you live together and you're spending all this time together, but you're actually separate people. And, even talking about the concept of enmeshment, putting a label on it for many high functioning people, can be a little bit of a light bulb moment. So you might even want to talk about that concept with your partner, if you feel like it applies to you guys. And the positive news about it, again, to understand, is that it's something that couples who are actually very close and very strong, ironically, they are sometimes the most vulnerable to enmeshment. So if you're having an enmeshment situation, it doesn't mean, that there's anything wrong with you as a couple. It actually means that you have such a strong bond that you might need help learning how to manage it. So another thing with boundaries that can be helpful to think about is intentional or compassionate silence. And this is true whether you're living alone or in a couple. A lot of times when we're, kind of stuck like this, whether you're alone and so you have this feeling that whenever anybody calls, like you're available, you can't really pretend to be out. Or couples that just feel this constant pressure to interact. What we can do is we can actually define together a period of intentional and compassionate silence. And in a couple, that could be as short as 10 minutes or as long as 10 hours. If you're in a couple, it's important to define in advance, how long it's going to last, what the rules are, like is physical contact allowed? Are nonverbal gestures allowed? Are you going to make a music schedule in advance, or is it just going to be whoever wants to play whatever? Is there any, what if you have a business call? Is there like a room that's just for that kind of stuff? It's good to have the logistics figured out in advance so that when you're relaxing into that compassionate silence, that you can just really enjoy it and remove that pressure to feel like you have to relate on a verbal level constantly. Similarly, if you're living alone, it can feel quite different to know that you're taking a period of quiet where you're deliberately not answering your phone and you're truly taking some alone time rather than just, you're quiet at the moment because no one happens to be calling. So learning a little bit about boundaries and taking like a mini silent retreat, hearkening back to my yoga teacher days, might be something to consider. And if you're curious about this kind of stuff, you can also Google things like, compassionate silence or how to take a silent retreat, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You just choose a block of time, and then decide for that time that you're just going to be in a compassionate sense of quiet. And it's a great time whether you choose to journal, watch TV, whatever you want to do. It's just nice nonverbal recharge time. Another thing for people who are talked out, so to speak, in family situations or couple situations, is this kind of stuff I have on the screen. It's called table topics is one thing, or the Ungame. And again, for some reason, it's not on the slide, but that link, drclay.com/COVID. I do have a few of these types of conversation cards linked there. So, when we've all been locked up together for such a long time, we can feel like, what else is there to talk about? And these types of conversation starter cards, table topics or the Ungame, that kind of thing, they prime us to say, some interesting questions like who most changed you in your life and why, just stuff that we wouldn't normally have come up in conversation. And it can stir the conversation pot for us a little bit, which again can be handy even in non-COVID times, but especially when we're in this quarantine situation, it can be helpful to have a little extra support. So moving along to something else in terms of structure and routine is our circadian rhythms. Our circadian rhythms in psychology are just these 24-hour cycles. So circa is Latin or Greek for about, and dia is I can't remember if it's Latin or Greek for day. So it means about the day. So it's a 24-hour cycle. And we have, our circadian rhythms around sleep and wakefulness and things like that. They can actually get a little bit thrown off in quarantine because we're spending all this time inside. So we're not in touch with, the day and the night happening as much, or just our normal routines. So like I mentioned earlier, it can be helpful to program your smart device into routines. You can even program them so that at 8 p.m., your Alexa, I don't want to say the name because mine will wake up, your Amazon device or your Google smart home device will actually make an announcement at 8 p.m. or whatever time you want and actually say anything you want. You can even have them say, Chloe, it's time to get ready for bed, at 8 o'clock, and then start some relaxing nature sounds or whatever it is that you want. And that can be helpful. I also recommend setting your phone. There's an app, it's called Flux, or there's different types of apps that will literally make your phone go black and white screen, say at 8 p.m., because when we remove the color stimulation from our phones, they become a lot less inviting and stimulating for us. I also mentioned one of my favorite things is audiobooks, because you get to close your eyes and let that internal monologue get wrapped around a story, and you can start winding down your day a little bit. I encourage you to keep a pen and paper by your bed as well, so that if you do have sudden thoughts or things pop into your mind that you feel you want to do, the next day or whatever, just write them down. Don't pick up your phone and send yourself an email, because the next thing it's like the machine gets going, so to speak. And I'm like your whole mental process. Also, sleep masks are great, especially the kind that don't disturb your REM sleep. So the sleep masks that I have here and that are linked on the page below are really good sleep masks, in my opinion. So if you put on a sleep mask and you have that nature sounds going, and maybe also playing an audiobook or something like that, you're starting to really nudge your body in a biological way towards sleep. And that can be helpful in maintaining our good structure and routine around our circadian rhythms. Another thing, as I mentioned earlier, is showering is part of our circadian rhythms. It can be part of our circadian rhythms. So if you take a warm shower at night, it'll actually stimulate your body to do some self-cooling. The good thing about getting your body to start up a self-cooling cycle is that that's part of the circadian rhythm sleep cycle. So when your body starts doing self-cooling, it starts thinking it's time for sleep. So that would be one more thing to add into your, nighttime routine, is a warm shower, ironically, to get your body to start a self-cooling process. It doesn't necessarily work the same if you just turn up the air really cold, because that's not an intrinsic, it's not coming from you. So you might consider taking a warm shower to start that self-cooling process. And then with shower tablets, a wonderful discovery that maybe everybody knew about except for me. I don't know, but there's these, as you can see, shower steamers or other types of shower tablets that you can put in the shower, and then they'll release a nice little scent with every shower. And that helps the shower as well to feel fresh and new for you, that you're rotating the scents and just keeping your mind with what we call a novel stimulus, so that it's harder for you to actually start thinking about just kind of your usual day-to-day routine stuff when you're smelling something new and it's starting to affect the way that you feel. Scents actually go in our olfactory lobe. They go directly from our nose to our brain. It's one of the most direct circuits to your brain that you can have. So I would encourage you to consider taking advantage of that. Now, I know I'm talking about all this stuff like, program your phone to do this, or, get these shower tablets for yourself, or, take extra good care of yourself in all these different ways. And some of us might not be used to prioritizing our own needs or doing everything just so for ourselves in such a fancy, precious way. And I would encourage you to recognize that right now is actually the time to really do that, to really follow through for yourself, to get that audiobook, to set something up for yourself, to take exquisite care of yourself. And if you're struggling with that, one thing that you can do is a little, kind of trick for yourself, is to pretend that you're getting ready for a very special guest, or to pretend, that this is your job and you have to make everything perfect for a very special guest who's coming, for a business purpose or something like that. I would love it if you were able to just intrinsically choose to do these things perfectly for yourself. But if for some reason it's hard for you to do that, just simply pretend for a moment, that you're doing them to take care of others. Now, another thing when we think about self-care and our routines is, of course, the subject of alcohol. When we're alone in quarantine, all of the social cues about drinking just aren't really there. The normal kind of guardrails when it comes to drinking, like, people could smell alcohol on my breath, or it's, maybe a little early in the day, or how many drinks you've had, all of that stuff that is more visible when we're not in quarantine. is suddenly invisible. And so the boundaries around drinking can actually get a little bit blurred. One tip I have on that one is to think about mindfulness with drinking. And I do have a blog on mindful drinking. So if you Google my name with, mindful drinking, and I have a video on my YouTube channel about it too, about how to drink mindfully, you can check that out. I think that they're also linked on the drchloe.com/COVID. But one of the simple things I encourage people to do is to replace judgment with curiosity, to just start by becoming curious how many drinks you're having per day, and to just, note it down and find what I call your magic number, or your drinking sweet spot. Find out how many drinks actually makes you feel really good. Many people end up drinking one or two or a few more than actually makes them feel good. And so if we can think about this in terms of maximizing our pleasure, then drinking in moderation suddenly becomes a lot more fun. If we think about drinking in moderation as like deprivation, like, oh, I really want this, it'd be so much fun to have more, but I'm trying to be responsible with my drinking, so I won't, then it's like you're battling yourself, like of your pleasure side versus your discipline side. And you can merge them together in a beautiful way by realizing that for many people, like maybe 3 drinks is actually going to make them feel really good. And then the fourth and the fifth are actually not even truly bringing pleasure in the moment or the next day. So if you're curious about that, this is a good time to, explore that. Again, these are all things that would be helpful for people typically anyway. Now, talking to kids about COVID, that's one thing, that I know people are really thinking about. I will say that there is no one single right way. And it's going to vary, of course, by the child and their age. Younger kids like this one, they do tend to absorb scary information in waves. So they might ask some questions and then, not talk about it very much for a while, and that's fine. With younger kids like this age, the important thing is to convey a sense of safety, right? So just to, if they say, well, why are people wearing masks? Well, they're wearing masks because there's some, viruses that are happening, and this is what we need to do to keep ourselves safe. And just keep reinforcing to your child that this is about safety, and we're doing these things because it helps us to stay safe, and that's what we want to do, is follow the directions so that we can stay safe, to just keep it very simple. Now, when it comes to teens and the kids are getting a little bit older, it's actually really important to not protect them out of an opportunity to develop and to mature. So a lot of parents, I think, have noticed that maybe their kids are stressed and acting out a little bit, and they want to give the kids leeway because they recognize that this is a tough time. To a certain degree, that's helpful. On the other hand, you don't want to collude with the maladaptive, unhealthy idea that quarantine is so stressful that your child cannot be expected to behave in a respectful, productive, healthy, positive manner where they're doing the things that they should be doing for school, they're helping out around the house, and they're being respectful. So again, it's kind of a delicate balance where we do want to recognize that we're all under a lot of stress and we want to give people a little bit of leeway, but especially for as the kids are getting older, we want to convey that we have high expectations for them, that even during stress, there are certain basic standards of behavior that we need to have in terms of our care for ourselves and as a member of the community in our household. So it's important to think about that as well in terms of empathy, that you can share with your child also that this is hard for you, that you don't have all the answers, that you might find yourself also not being at your best all the time, but that you're able to acknowledge that and hold yourself to as high a standard as you can, and that you can have some real talks with kids about that kind of stuff. Letting them know that if they're grouchy because of quarantine and they take it out on you, or if they're, not loving this homeschooling thing, so then they're failing school or whatever, that stresses you out, that you care for them and that affects you. That's not being selfish as a parent. That's actually teaching your children about empathy and about how their behaviors and actions do affect others, and that all of the feelings that you feel around them are really about a desire to nurture them and to care for them and to see them grow and develop in a healthy way. So certainly, as well as kids get a little bit older, it can be helpful to get them into some volunteer opportunities as well, so that they don't get stuck in feeling helpless, and that they realize that they have the ability to, help others. And it helps them to practice a little bit of perspective taking and not feel super stuck in their own head too much. And that's true for adults too. And another fun thing for kids that are a little bit older is to invite them to rearrange the house, to rearrange the furniture. It can introduce a little bit of a fresh feeling. It can trick your brain into feeling like you're in a new space. And it can be fun. Like kids, teenagers wouldn't normally get, or even preteens wouldn't normally get to, just execute these types of changes. So it can be a fun, thing to include them in. Now, chores are also a really great thing. And this is a picture of my little 3.5-year-old son vacuuming. So I just put that up there just to make the point that even at a very young age, learning how to take care of your environment is really important. It, gives us a sense of community membership and personal pride, accountability, respect for each person as a member of the family, that, mom or dad is not the maid, and, we all need to be here and take care of our home. And it also can be a lot of fun, right? So as we start to have these little responsibilities that we're doing together, it can almost become a little bit of a family activity. And chores are very good for adults as well, for all of us to just, especially during this time, make sure that we're taking care of our space and practicing good self-care. And our home is an extension of ourselves, our home environment. It's our habitat. And so we want to give ourselves a nice, clean, good, positive, healthy habitat. Now I know I'm kind of flying through these slides because we need to finish by 3:00. So I wanted to, end on a little bit of an upbeat note. I'm ending quite yet. I've got a couple more slides, but I wanted to encourage everyone to give themselves permission as well to feel happy. One of the things I've also heard from people is that they almost feel like if they relax and start to have good days and find some silver linings and things that they enjoy about the situation, it's as if they're, not being respectful of the hardships that other people are having. I want to relieve you of that mindset, for you to actually be able to thrive in your own way and to have good days. That's actually wonderful. And it prepares you to be able to be strong and resilient and offer yourself as a resource and a support for anyone else that might need or want that support. So if you're starting to notice that you're actually feeling good or feeling okay, don't feel that you have to hide your light under a bushel, so to speak. It's perfectly fine and wonderful if you're feeling okay and you're finding some things about this, that you actually kind of enjoy. Now, obviously, as a psychologist, I couldn't help but just once again want to emphasize that anyone who does need or want more one-to-one support, teletherapy is absolutely available. Teladoc, Teladoc. I think that they have some online stuff. Most places do. I know my office certainly does. If you call the number on the back of your insurance card, they can probably help as well. Also on drchloe.com/COVID, there's a link to some places on my website where I link to a bunch of other therapists and their offices, and some options as well, for people that are looking for support. So if you're just, suffering from whether it be loneliness or anxiety or any of the things that we've talked about or other stuff, please know that support is definitely available. Also, if you want to ask a friend and just talk to a friend, sometimes that helps a lot too. I found that high functioning people are sometimes afraid to lean on a friend for support because they think that they're going to be a burden. But the truth is that when you ask someone for support, usually that person actually feels flattered and recognized, that you noticed them as a person that you viewed as capable and able to offer support. And that's actually paying the person a compliment. So as long as you're not, 24/7 hitting people up for support, that could become a little tiresome. But, just now and then, if you're having a little bit of a hard day and you just want to see a human face or hear a human voice or talk over some stuff that's been on your mind, please know that reaching out and talking to a friend is rarely ever actually a burden. If that's a fear of yours, please know that it actually facilitates closeness, and it's actually a compliment to the other person that you view them as a resource. But if for whatever reason you feel like therapy is best for you, that's obviously also available too. So I'm not going to get into that last slide about when quarantine ends because we're a little short on time. But I do want to thank you so much for coming. Apologies again that we got started a little bit later. I'm a little new at this still, this whole live stream stuff, but it's been a lot of fun. I hope that you will connect with me on Twitter. My Dr. Chloe Twitter, I'm for some reason locked out of it right now, but hopefully in the next week I'll be back on. I love Twitter. I also love Instagram. I do Facebook and then YouTube as well. So if you go to drchloe.tv, it'll point you directly to my YouTube channel. Also, as you can see, we've got drchloe.com/COVID for some links to some of the resources I mentioned here. And drchloe.com/hello has links to all of my social medias and newsletters, sign up and all that kind of stuff. So I want to thank everyone again for coming. And if you're watching later, thanks for watching later. But if you're watching live, I want to thank you again for spending this time with me and for your patience with me as I navigated my first ever full-length live stream. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.